go back to what we call old-time religion, which he named it Islamism. Okay, like I said before, there was no such thing as Islamism, in ancient times. This was a word that Noble Bandele used to describe the old-time religions. Now, at one point, I thought, well, why Islam and why he's using that brand of science to put our people under that fold? Because being Afrocentric and studying and whatnot, we know that a lot of times we know Islam, where the Muslims so-called came into Africa and they seemed to invade and basically brought that religion with them. That's what I've always been under. But I failed to realize that Islam, like Christianity, has its true origins in paganism and also has its true origins in dark-skinned, melanated people. A lot of us tend to forget or not realize that when we say Arab, when we think about today Arab, we think about maybe a pale-skinned version of a person, very light complexion. But Arabs were very dark, and Arabs were they're not considered a race of people per se. We tend to think of them as Semitic or, like I said, light skin. You know what I'm saying? But truth of the matter is that Arabs really are very dark, and if you look over there, you'll see a range from very dark to light. So I mean, we know that there were very dark skinned, dark individuals, complected, melanated people in Arabia, because that's where the word comes from, Arabia. Okay, so we know that. Now, when we look at the word Islam, we understand that Islamism is a play on words by Bandele. Now, but when we look at the actual, history of Islam, we know that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him, he introduced Islam in 610 A.D. or Common Era, and it was brought in Saudi Arabia. Okay. Now, if that was brought to us in 610 or brought to the world by the Prophet Muhammad, it was revealed to him in around 610, is that the actual creed of our forefathers? And we're talking about 610 A.D., so we're talking about 610 years after the alleged Joshua, or what you call Jesus. That's 610 years later. That's 270 or 280 years after the Nicene Council. Okay, so we're talking about 610 years. You know what I'm saying? I mean, after Christianity, was founded in Jerusalem. You know what I'm saying? So if we're talking about the creed of our ancient forefathers, the creeds of our ancient forefathers will go back even further than Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. It will go back further than that. Okay? So, and I understand that the Prophet Muhammad brought things that were already revealed, and he was just bringing back or reestablishing some things. So I know people are going to say that, people like to term and coin the term Islam and say, well, Islam was the first people that settled in the world. The first people who prayed to God were Muslim or whatever. But these are play on words, because they may necessarily not use the term Muslim or Islam in that way back in ancient times. Okay. Now, what we find is that Islam comes from a much older tradition, and that tradition, it comes from what we call the Sabaeans, or Sabaeans, and that's spelled Sabeans, or Sabaeans. Okay, now, these people are very important to what we know of Islam, and these people are really important to Moorish Science, because they are the founders of Moorish Science. When we read in our 101s, and it says that Mecca was, Mecca was already a holy city. When you read the keys and you see that Mecca was already a holy city before, it's always been deemed as holy or spiritual. It's because it comes from these people called the Sabaeans. Okay, and these people are ancient people from Yemen or southwest of the Arabian Peninsula. So these people lived in what is called Arabia. These people are in the southern regions of Arabia, which is important to Muhammad because the Prophet Muhammad definitely had dealings and knew who they were. It's almost like how could Elijah Muhammad or Farad Muhammad not know about the Moorish Science Temple of America if they were running around in that time? And so if the same Prophet Muhammad was around at that time, the so-called pagan religions were there, and Muhammad was very aware of the Sabaeans and their science. It wouldn't have been anything new to him. Now, what's important about the Sabaeans is that they also call Saba. Sabaeans and Saba. Now, you got to understand what this word, Saba, S-A-B-A, okay, that's the root word to the Sabaeans is Saba. And it also has a play on the queen, Sheba. Sheba's also considered Saba. Okay. Now, what's important about that is that Queen Sheba, which is supposed to be the link between Israel and Ethiopia, is made through Queen Sheba. Queen Sheba supposed to have had a son named Menelik, which in that line, through that line is where you even get Rastafari. Rastafarism is through because of the lineage between Queen Sheba and Menelik. And that lineage is supposed to have gone all the way through till it gets to Haile Selassie the first. Okay? And so Sheba is important with that connection with Saba. Now, the word Saba, again, the word Saba is going to come back into play again when we're dealing with the Moorish Science. The other thing is that the Sabaeans were very much into trade. They were very involved in spice trades. And spice trading in particular was the franc and myrrh. Now, we know as spiritual people that franc and myrrh are probably the two most outside of sage. But franc and myrrh are probably the most important, popular, and most powerful spices that's been used in the world. Franc and myrrh is what they allegedly was given in the story with Jesus and Yahshua when he was allegedly born. That was what they gave him, franc and myrrh. Franc and myrrh has always been used in all of the holy temples around the world, well, especially in the Africa and, the African systems, European systems that came out of Africa, and in Arabia and all that. Those were very important. Franc and myrrh are supposed to ward off evil spirits and bring a positive vibration to the room. We all use franc and myrrh. I mean, I use franc and myrrh, when we do things. I went to a Catholic funeral, and they take franc and they go around the casket at the funeral. They're the only church that I know that's a Christian church that uses incense in their church. Most African American churches don't use franc and myrrh or use any type of incense whatsoever in their church. But nonetheless, the fact that these people are very important, probably in the world, because of their franc and myrrh trade. So everybody knew knew the Sabaeans because of the franc and myrrh trade. Okay. Now, also makes a comparison and rates on the Sabaeans. And he says that the Sabaeans had 7 temples dedicated to 7 planets. Each temple had a characteristic, a color to each temple, and an image, and also had a particular metal that was to each temple. Now, I mention this because this also is a connection to Moorish science, because we talk about the Circle Seven. Circle Seven Quran. The seven is the God number. It's the letter G. It's the seventh alphabet. It's the G is the seventh letter in the alphabet. So that's why Masons use G. But as Moorish Americans, you see a lot of Moorish Americans will wear the seven. You'll see a circle seven. Now, what is this seven? Also, we know it's 7 days in a week because we're taught that. We're also taught that 52 weeks in a year, and 5 and 2 is 7. We also understand that there's 7 primary colors. When we look at from a more science perspective, but the science is deeper when they're dealing with the 7 temples. Why? The Sabaeans had 7 temples because that was for the planets that were known. There was 5 planets that they looked at. In the ancient times, there was 5 known planets, and then the 2 were the moon and the sun. So the moon and the sun always represented something, and that's why you get the 7 days of the week. The 7 days of the week also have an attribute to each planet. You know what I mean? So like Monday is the moon day. And they or like Saturn, the last day of the week is Saturday, which is Saturn's day. So we also know that each day of the week correlates to a particular planet. Okay? So when we look at that, we can see that. So now we have also, we're dealing with the 7 chakra systems. And you understand what I'm saying? We also have 7 main chakras in the body. And with that, they have a correlation to each temple that was placed. Okay? Because each temple that Sabaeans had also had a geometrical pattern. And when you look at the chakras, you also see that each chakra has a geometrical pattern involved with it. Okay? Now, what else is the fact that you have with the Sabaeans, you have 2 distinct sects of people that were Sabaeans. One group was the star, what they call star worshiper, or then you have one that was called an idol worshiper. Now, according to the doctrine also, that this system that they had can also be related or correlate to what they call Hermes Trismigestus. So you got Hermes Trismigestus, which is known as Tahuti. Okay, in our African system, we would call Hermes Tahuti. So with that, you're looking at a system or this ancient system that the Sabaeans cultivated is very similar to other systems, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But like the Kemetic system, the Canaanite systems, Libya, these different groups, Sumerians, Phoenicians, all had the very similar systems already in place. Okay, and so as what I've gathered as these ancient groups emerged and evolved, they came up with these modern religions that we have today, because Christianity is very much similar in its concepts that is taken from like Kemetic philosophy with Isis or Osset and making her Mary. the Virgin Mary, you see. And so when we look at the Islam, that we see that Islam is pulling its knowledge from old time religion, and I'm gonna say why. Because before I go any further, I wanted to also make another correlation to the word Saba. We talked about the people of Saba or the Sabaeans. Now, it's interesting that Saba is the Kiswahili word for southern. So we back to that southern again. Okay. Also, we know that the seventh day of the week, according to the Judaic faith, the Jews, we know that the seventh day is called the Sabbath. The Sabbath. So Southern, Saba, and the people of Saba. Now, they call themselves the Sabaeans, which is the people of Saba, meaning the people of God. So we back to the God number being 7, and we understand, in that circle 7 again. So I just wanted to make that correlation before I move further. Let's look at the origin of the word Allah, okay? Because the word Allah is used by Moorish Science, Moorish Americans. It is used by people all of Islamic faith. Okay, that actual word did not originate from Islam. Okay, and that's very important to understand. It is very controversial about the origin of this word, but it's got to be looked at and discussed. And this is something that we all have to look at and research, okay, and to see where I'm going with this and see why I came up with this. Okay, but now the origin of Allah has various origins, if you will. One of them is we look at the word, the Hebrew version, because I understand that Arabic and Hebrew and Aramaic are all very similar. They all have the same origin. They're called Afro-Asiatic languages, okay, for a reason. Afro-Asiatic, meaning that their origins really come out of an African origin, okay? But those three linguistics are actually very grounded in the same origin, okay? So in Hebrew, Allah would be Eloah, and that's Eloah. So you see the only difference in the word really is the L and the O. So Eloah is the Hebrew word, because you understand El in Hebrew is, well, not in Hebrew, but El comes out of Canaan, really. But El is a deity, a god. But you see El in Hebrew, like Raphael, these, the Gabriel. The El is always attributed to God. And when you see in Arabic, it's always Al. So like Al Qaeda, Al Jazeera, so that AL and EL are very similar in their translation. Okay. But you got also the word Aliyah. You understand? Aliyah is spelled AL-ILAH. Okay. Al-Iyah. Al-Ilah. Al-Ilah. Allah. These words predate Islam. Now, the origin for Islam is that Allah becomes the form of the moon, actually. You understand? The word Allah before Islam represented the moon deity.